Hey, everyone. Hi. Hello. Welcome to another episode of Alison Rosen is Your New Best Friend. I am very, very, very excited about today's guest, and I don't want to keep her waiting long. Not my usual yammering on and on and on while I pretend the guest's in traffic, even though really they're there. So I just quickly want to check in with producer Tony Thaxton, the bad boy of podcasting, to find out how he's doing. Tony, hello. You just got back from a night away, from playing a show. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Feeling a little worn out, but in a good way. Yeah, we just went out of town to Palm Springs for a night and then came back and played a show last night, and that was super fun.
Nice. I saw that some listeners were at the show.
Yeah, some listeners were there, came and said hello. Our friend Renee Culvert was there, so I got to see her for a little bit. Yeah, it was a really fun night.
And you played drums in two bands back to back. And you had been hiking in advance of that to try to build, in advance of your tour that you're doing. But how was your stamina?
It was fine for this show. It's more the Motion City stuff that I'm concerned about, because that's a lot more high energy, just go, 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 go. Whereas this the Don't Stop stuff has some energy there, but it's, very silly and still a little more laid back. And the Townland set that I played, it literally, and I don't mean this as an insult, it's just a fact, their stuff is very mellow, and I literally did not even sweat when I was playing with them, which is, it might be the first show I've ever played where I didn't have a drop of sweat. Allison's your new best friend.
So Don't Stop went live on Instagram and streamed a little bit of the Townland set, and I had never heard them, and I listened and I was like, oh, this is what Matt Gorley would play.
Yeah, it's totally.
I could sit back and relax in a mid-century modern living room listening to that music.
Yeah, they're very good.
And then also Don't Stop, I saw a little bit of that, and I saw you were not wearing a mask, but were the guys were they singing and performing in masks?
Yeah, Paul and Mike kept their masks on. Townland did not. The Townland took them off. I don't know. I was like, I keep my mask on always, but playing a show, playing drums, that's
be hard. Yeah,
I feel like, yeah.
So Tony, I took the kids to the zoo yesterday, and I don't know if you know this about the LA Zoo, and I'm not exaggerating. It is roughly 45 degrees hotter there than anywhere else in LA. And it was like a pretty temperate day yesterday, but for some reason it is just brutal at the zoo, and it's mostly uphill and there's no shade. And I realized, this is a theory I've been working on it came up on Childish on a few different podcasts. I've realized in my old age, I am like the lapdog of humans. I'm just meant to sit. That's what I do best. And I can watch stuff. I can mess around on my phone, some light playing with my kids. But I don't brave the elements well. I don't like being exhausted. So yeah, I did not have the best time at the zoo, although the kids did have a good time. But you might not know this. I didn't know this. We got to the meerkat exhibit, and there was a rope around it and a sign saying to keep your distance because meerkats are high risk for COVID.
No.
Yeah.
No, I can't say that I knew that.
And the way meerkats stand up and at all times are like, oh no, what's going on over there? What's going on over there?
Yeah.
I figured they're on guard just like we are.
Right. Interesting. I didn't know any animals could be at that.
Yeah, I did. I think maybe I had read that there was concern earlier in the pandemic about that, but then I did a little Google, and a lot of animals are at risk, and there's even an animal vaccine. That's it doesn't have mRNA, but it has the antigen. And then I read the word spike protein, and then I was like, okay, I'm done reading this. Right. I was like, this is going to require more concentration than I have right now in the middle of doing two things. I will go back and read it though. But anyway, speaking of things that require that is a terrible segue. I just suspect our guest always has the ability to concentrate because, Tony, she has a PhD from Harvard in economics. She's possibly the most decorated in high education guest we've ever had. She teaches. She's a professor at Brown University. She's put out 3 books, all of which have helped me immensely as a mom: Expecting Better, Cribsheet, and now her new one, The Family Firm, which I'm holding up to the camera, youtube.com/Alison Rosen. It is. And also, she has been very prolific during this pandemic and helped ease a lot of people, ease their mind, I think, about the specific risks, because this pandemic is just constant risk assessment. Please put your hands together for someone I'm so delighted to bring onto the show, Emily Oster. Hello.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on. Am I right that you always have just endless concentration available?
No, I think one of the concentration went like the way of the dodo with my children, where like now I try to concentrate and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, did I remember to send them the snacks? Oh, did I remember? So I feel like I don't know, maybe when I was getting my PhD, I had the ability to concentrate, but it's gone.
So, your books offer specific parenting advice, I would say, but moreover, tell me if you agree with this. Moreover, they offer a framework for how to make decisions.
Yeah, I think that's how I would describe it, that it's sort of the thing that I think of as different about my books than some of the other stuff that's out there is it's I'm trying hard not to say this is the way you should do it or do it like this, but rather trying to say like, here are the choices and here's how you could make that decision.
Right.
For yourself.
Yes. I'm going to backtrack and take out the part where I said they offer specific parenting advice, because they don't really, I guess what I'm trying to say is like they work on a couple different levels. Because if you just want some information about this, this specific choice, that's in the books, but it sort of sets you up for how to make a series of decisions for each age that your kid is at. So what I'm wondering is, do you look at people who make rash decisions and just think, what are you doing?
No, I try not to. I feel like when it's funny. So when I wrote the second book, which is sort of about like is about parenting and about parenting babies and so on, I feel like the process of writing that book made me a slightly less judgmental person. Mm-hmm. And, partly because so much of what I was trying to convey there was like, hey, there's a lot of good ways to do this. And, you could choose to breastfeed or not breastfeed. And like, those are both kind of reasonable choices and a lot of stuff in that space. And so I kind of tried very hard to dial down both my judgmentalness and my like advice giving instincts. Right. So you sort of said like your books are kind of like operate partially as advice. Part of my instinct when people are like, here's how I'm doing it, is to be like, no, do it a different way. And so I actually really have tried over time to like do that less. But I will say sometimes people will describe things like, oh, we're doing, here are all the like millions of activities that we're doing at all times. And I want to be like, maybe do less of them. Like you said, that's so tiring.
But the urge to go, no. Is that based on the data that you've looked at or something internal?
I think it's partly internal. I mean, so sometimes, particularly when we start talking now, like a lot of my kids, my sort of parent friends have older kids. And so there's a piece of it where sometimes people will be like, here's all the things I'm doing. And I will like put together that their kid must be going to bed really late. And like, I'm like a sort of like for myself, like kind of a sleep seller, like I'm very into sleep for my kids. And so sometimes I want to be like, your kids should sleep more. But and that's, I'm sort of like trying, it's like, okay, so there's a piece of that that's about the data, but some of it is just like, wow, that sounds so exhausting. And like, I can't imagine doing it like that.
When it came to, and I'm honing in on the decision-making, not only because it's a big part of your books, but also because I myself struggle with decisions, as my listeners well know. It's weird with big things. That's not hard for me, but it's like the little sort of seemingly inconsequential stuff that I overthink a lot.
Give me an example.
I've gotten better, but I once spent so long in a store trying to choose a notebook, trying to choose which color, because I truly have gotten like these things don't flummox me anymore. But at the time, it was like, okay, I think I like this color better. And they're like, oh, but what if I got that color? What if I could be the kind of person who would have that? That would be like a exciting new, element in my life. And it just, Or like choosing an electric toothbrush. I remember that was very difficult. Things, again, they don't matter.
Okay. Yeah.
Because I like to explore all of the options. Like when my husband and I are choosing, this is something that hasn't come up in a long time, but back when we would be choosing a restaurant.
Sure.
I would.
In the before times.
Exactly. His process is think about what you feel like eating and then find a restaurant that has that. And my process is I want to look at all the available restaurants and think about the atmosphere and look at the menus and then choose. And to him, it's just going to take, he's like, I don't want to spend that much time thinking about it. I'm like, I enjoy thinking about it like that. So anyway, what has been your relationship to decision making?
So I think, I think I'm a pretty good decision maker. I mean, partly like I think that one of the things we've tried to do really like a lot in our family is sort of separate like important decisions from not important decisions in terms of like how much energy we give them. And I think my husband actually probably gives more attention to what I think are less important decisions, or he like wants everything to be like sort of optimized in various ways, where I think for small things, I'm sort of like, I'll just like do whatever. And then we sort of try to put more attention on the decisions that are more, that are bigger. But I think I probably err towards like oddly sort of spending not enough time sometimes on decisions. And then later being like, oh, I probably should have done that differently.
Like what?
I think so. I guess maybe the way I would say it is like I want to move on. Like I don't. So for like small decisions, that's fine. For a decision I remember when I was trying to decide whether I should write a second book, which is of course like a huge decision, which was going to shape and ended up actually shaping like my more or less my entire career and like the following now 5 years like indefinitely. And I was sort of like, okay, yeah, I want to do it. And I had sort of like worked, and my husband was like, no, okay, maybe, but like, let's actually really sit down and think about like, this is not, this is a really big choice. And here we have to really work through it. And I think that I kind of like, we got to the same place in the end. And I think sometimes I just like wanted to be there. And I think part of what I like about him, I guess part of what like makes it work is I think that's sort of right. That was like the right thing there. And I think he's pretty good about like, let's just like slow it down a little bit.
So what I'm hearing is you and my husband would be able to choose a restaurant together really fast.
Yes. That's what I think. Your husband and I would be like already eating, and you and my husband would be like perusing like, different food options.
Exactly. What was the sausage roll disaster of 2020?
Okay, so in my defense, I just want to emphasize that this was the day of the election. Okay, so it was like a very high stress day. And I had decided to make a recipe for sausage rolls, which was like, it involved like some puff pastry and they wrapped around so it was like a kind of elaborate thing. And I'm like a good cook, but like this was a lot. And I was also trying at the same time to do like a pretty high stakes work meeting while I was cooking this. And so I like cooked them. And then one of the things that happened was like, because I was like trying to be like on the Zoom and like take them out of the oven at the same time, I spilled a bunch of like sausage oil on the floor, but that was actually not the disaster. That was just like a thing that happened. But then nobody liked them. They were like it was just like, they were not good. They were okay, but they were sort of like kind of the texture was wrong. It was just like something that was not good about them. And I got like having put all this time in and then being so stressed, I was like really upset that nobody liked them. And then this is the part this is the bad thing, is that then I like when people were like, we just don't like them, I like picked up the pan and I threw them in the sink. And like, in a kind of, not very mature reaction to the experience. And so, that was the sausage roll episode.
Would you describe yourself as hot-headed?
No, actually, this was like, I think part of what made this notable was that it's actually a pretty unusual way. Like it was not unusual in the sense that like, if I've sort of like put time into something, that I am like sad if it doesn't work out. But that was like the idea of like throwing things in the sink. That's like totally out of character, which I think is why it made such an impression on my children.
So your parents are both professors, right?
Yes.
What was that like growing up with to professor parents?
I mean, it was like I had like I had a lovely childhood. I'm very close to my parents, and I think the probably the most important aspect of that is just that it like exposed me to the idea that this was a job that you could have, which I think not everybody sort of sees, and so I think that that's probably the way in which it was most formative. Although I think also like a lot of this idea of sort of deliberateness around decision making, particularly that I write about in the new book, I think is reflective of the way my parents, parented or thought about decisions. And I don't know how much of that is just their economists or their professors or some other, just like something else about personalities.
Did you always want to go into academics?
More or less, but not necessarily in economics. I mean, I think I've always been really, really interested in doing research, like even as a little kid. Mm-hmm. And so I think that was a sort of like direction that I was interested in heading. But I thought I would do like I thought I would do hard sciences.
Mm-hmm. Do you remember one of the first things you researched as a kid?
Yes, I remember. I spent a lot of time in the 8th grade researching the Babylonian currency system, which is a
same.
It's interesting. I mean, it's not that interesting, but it's like in base 60, I think, or it's not a base 10 number system. That's all I remember about that. And then in high school, I spent a long time researching canals, like the Farmington Canal and different things about canals and railroads for some project, which I remember being like wow, like that's like kind of, that was very fun.
Mm-hmm. What about this is a very general question, but like, what about research appealed to you? Is it the process of finding information, or like the actual accumulation of the information?
It is the moment when you know something that other people don't. That is actually not a hard question. That is an easy question. And I was reminded of it this morning because I was doing some stuff about like some research about COVID, not too surprising. And some new data came in, and I had like a moment, like a sort of 20 minutes this morning to try to do it. And then there's like, and I sort of made a graph that I was interested in the answer to, like, and it was sort of, and then there's like that moment where like, something and nobody else knows it. Mm-hmm. And there's just like, that's like so special. And that is the thing that is the, just by infinite leaps and bounds, the best part. And all the other parts where you're like, trying to write it up and make the tables and convince other people, all that stuff is like fine. And I like parts of it, but that moment is really special.
Where do you go? Actually, okay. Let's say the layperson is like, I want to be able to make decisions informed by data, but where would that person go to find that information?
Kind of depends what kind of decisions you want to make.
Let's say it's COVID. Well, COVID, just to link it to something we're all dealing with, I have not necessarily felt like I want to go to the data, but I've felt like I don't know what sources to trust. Like, I wish I could just go to like Dr. Fauci's blog or so. I don't even know if he has one. Maybe he does.
So. He should have a Substack newsletter.
Yes,
that would be like amazing. You got to get Dr. Fauci on Substack.
Yes, or Patreon even.
Patreon, sure, anywhere.
Yeah. So it's sort of twofold question. Where do you go when you're looking for data, and then where does the layperson go?
So I think, there are some pieces of data where that's easier. So like, what is the case rate? What is the COVID case rate? What do hospitalizations look like? I go to the New York Times. There are some sources like that. The thing that I think is much harder is like, let's say I wanted to know like something that is sort of one step more complicated, like how common are breakthrough infections, right? Mm-hmm. So I was writing something about like how common are breakthrough infections? How does natural immunity compare to vaccination immunity? I think part of what's hard is that actually figuring out the answer to that requires reading many different pieces of data. And so, I like Fauci, I like, Bob Wagner, but I basically am like looking for people who are sharing in some way research studies. And then I'm going to the research studies. And so that's a little bit harder that's a harder thing to convey to a layperson, partly because sometimes when you go to those research studies, you're like, oh my gosh, this research study is so bad. And sometimes it's like, okay, this is better. So, I think there are a few people, like there's a guy named Bob Wachner at UCSF who is like a very useful person to follow. So I think some of this is about sort of curating like who you are listening to in the world.
Yeah. So what ultimately drew you to economics?
I think one answer to that is like, I knew a lot about it because my parents were economists. And so it was a sort of like, I was probably more aware of the ideas of economics than others. But I think part of what I like about it is the idea of sort of combining theory and data to answer questions, and the idea that you could answer big questions, big policy questions using evidence. And I really like statistics. And so a lot of my work is about methods and statistics and sort of things like that, where I think economists have a good perspective that I like, that I enjoy.
You're a professor of economics, right?
True.
So how much does what you're teaching in your classes relate to what you're publishing about?
So it depends what you mean by what I'm publishing about.
Sorry, your books and your Substack, what you're writing about.
What I'm writing about. So I think the ways in which they're sort of synergistic in the sense that most of what I teach is about, and sort of what I do in my real job is about sort of how to think about evidence and how to think about what we learn from data. So I teach classes that are pretty much like, read a bunch of papers and think about what's good data, what's not good data, how do we think about policy from this? And that is a big piece of what I write about in my Substack and in my books. And so I think that's the sense in which it's similar. Then there's a sort of separate piece, which is like, what do I do my academic work on? And that also has some overlap there, but probably less so, just because it is sort of more in the weeds of like trying to develop new methods or trying to sort of say new things with data, which is and for a more specialized audience.
I have a dumb feeling question, but and I was an English major, and economics has always been something that I'm like, I don't mess with that. But I think of economics as like financial systems, but what I'm getting is that it has so much to do with data sets and statistics, and like, is that sometimes divorced from financial systems in economics?
Yes. So the sort of traditional kind of like lay view of economics, which is it's like the Fed, that is a part of economics, which like a sort of subfield that we call macroeconomics. Actually, most economists at this point, like the vast majority of the field, is working in a space that's closer to where I am. So like microeconomics, applied microeconomics, where we're looking at data, using it to answer questions, which are mostly about policy and, analyzing things like Medicare, food stamps, or, sort of using the tools of statistics and economics to answer those questions, but not thinking about the Fed.
Right.
I don't really know anything about the Fed, honestly.
Well, I could, after the show, I'll fill you in. I'll explain.
Fill me in. Something about Jerome Powell. I heard about that guy. I don't know.
Yeah.
Inflation targeting. It's important.
Did you always want children?
Yes. Did you always want children?
Yes, I did. I was actually just thinking about this recently. My parents felt that like having kids was, one of the most important things that one can do. They didn't understand people who chose not to have children. I do, but they didn't understand people who chose not to have children. They felt like those people were really missing out on one of the great experiences that you can have. And so I think I just soaked that up like a sponge and just, I never thought, do I really agree with this? I just was raised to know that, of course, I'm going to have children. And I was thinking about that the other day because I was thinking that's one of those things that is like something that was sort of implanted in me from my parents. I didn't decide it on my own. That being said, I am really glad that I have kids. It was the right decision for me. And I did IVF. And so it was a whole undertaking.
You really thought it was not an accident?
Not at all. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. I mean, I feel like people are, like, this is something that you either really want, that you like feel in a way. So, you know, and I also think you, in some ways you sort of feel it about the number of kids. So people ask me like, what's the optimal number of kids? What's, you know, it's like, we don't really have like a data answer to that, but I think there's a huge piece of that, which is like, do you feel done? You know, do you feel like your family is complete?
Right.
And I think that's the first, you know, there's another author that I've spent some time talking to named Diana Freitas, who's like written a really good book called The 9 Lives of Rose Napolitano. And she like sort of the premise of a lot of her stuff and of that book is like, basically she's like, I did not want kids. Like I was sure I did not, it's not that I hate kids. I'm not like a kid. It's just like, that is not something I wanted. And, you know, that her view is like, that's actually a really hard thing to say, because people are like, oh, well, later you'll change your mind. You know, like sort of never, our culture is so much never say never. Like, what if you know, later you want them? And it's like, no, actually, like, I don't want kids. But I sort of had, I always wanted them.
And did you feel done after 2?
Yes. I did not feel done after 1, and after 2, I definitely felt done.
I have a 4-year-old and I have 2 boys, a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old. And it was just amazing to me how once the second one got here, I felt like, oh, now we're a family.
Yes.
Where I hadn't, I mean, I was so, you know, happy before. Actually, I don't know if I was happy all the time. That's
nobody's happy all the time.
Right. That's putting real rose-colored glasses on it. But I mean, I was delighted to have my first son, but the feeling changed entirely. And then for a second, I think when I realized I don't think I could have a third, even if I wanted, because it had become really hard to get embryos, and we used all of our embryos. And so it would have been like probably not possible to have a third. For a second, I was like, oh, maybe I really do want one. But I think I really am happy to have, I think 2 is the right number for me. My therapist said something, which is people pretty much recreate their family, the family they grew up in. And that is kind of the case for me because I have a younger sister. What about you? How many siblings do you have?
There are 3 of us.
Oh, okay.
And so it's interesting because I am the oldest, and then there's 2 boys. And so one of them has 4 kids. They were going for 3, but they got twins they got twins on number 4, number 3 and 4. And then the other brother has 2, but I think he would like to recreate that. Like, I think he wants 3.
Yeah.
They would like to sort of recreate the thing that we had. But I think for us, but my husband has 2. So my husband has 1 sister. So I think there's a little bit of, but I don't know. Yeah. I had exactly like when our son was born, it was like, okay, like now we're a family. My kids are 4 years apart. So there was like, we had like a long time with the big one. And then.
And how did you decide on that number?
So we thought, I think that we had somehow decided 2 was like too few. I don't know why I don't remember what the source of that was, but I remember always thinking that. And then we were thinking like we had sort of initially had some idea that we would try to have them 3 years apart. And then that 3 years was kind of right in the middle of like a really like sort of chaotic time professionally where we were like thinking of moving, and it did like a lot of stuff was going on. It was just like, you know what, this is like not a good environment in which this is not a good time for us to also be like having a baby. And so then we I don't know, in the end, like a year later, it was sort of better. And they're almost exactly like 2 weeks apart. Their birthdays are like 2 weeks apart. So we like almost hit it right on the nose. I was at the same conference. I found out I was pregnant with both kids.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Mine are 3 weeks apart. Yeah. 2 years and 3 weeks. So I had it in, my sister and I are 4 years apart. I had it in my head that 2 years was the perfect number, the ideal space. And, you know, you can find people giving you all sorts of advice about this, but it was like, I remember a nurse that I liked at the fertility clinic who's like, just make sure to do it by this point. Because if you don't do it by this age, then you're not going to want to, which at the time I was like, okay, but I don't think that's true. In fact, I could actually see a case where the first one is out of diapers and you kind of miss some of the baby stuff. And I don't know, you could go either way. But anyway, yeah, I just was like, okay, I guess 2 years is the perfect number. And then also for fertility reasons, it made, you know, I was asking my doctor at the time, like, well, when should we try again? And she's like, well, ideally, you know, this time. I was like, that sounds way too soon. And so there were other variables, But I have to say, super grateful to have 2 healthy kids. I do think 2 years is a great age difference, but people said to me like, oh, they'll be best friends. And they certainly are not best friends right now. Like they certainly are not as close as I think they will become close. But right now there's more conflict than I think there would be if I had like a 4-year-old and a newborn.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that stuff is very hard to predict and is also like very dependent on the kid and exactly the age. And like, so my kids, took a long time to get to play with each other because they're 4 years apart. And so it was like a long, like a 6-year-old, 2-year-old and that, but now they play together all the time. Actually, now they're like I think partly the pandemic was kind of good for that because it was like they were alone. And so they were only with each other. So it's sort of, but the dynamic, a 10-year-old is pretty different from a 6-year-old. And so their dynamic is kind of evolving, but I don't know. Right. And then like, how are you going to be as an adult? I'm pretty close to both my brothers, including the one who like I hated as a kid. So,
which one is that the middle or third?
One? No, the youngest one. We actually pulled up my mother for some reason saved all of our New Year's resolutions from children. So the other day we were like all together and we were like reading them. And the youngest brother and I, every year our resolutions are be nicer to the other one, like every single year. And it's like, they're like, and sometimes I'm like, be nicer to John, even though that's stupid.
Why did you dislike him? Do you remember?
I don't actually have any particular memory of why this was actually very similar. Like, I really like him now. He's like a wonderful person. I love his wife. I love his kids. Like, I don't know. I have no idea, what, we're like 5 years apart. Maybe there was just some, maybe I'm so bossy. Like probably I was like, just so bossy.
Are you bossy in your marriage?
Probably, but I think, but I don't think I don't think that's the way my husband would describe me.
What would he say?
I don't know, actually. I mean, I guess I just wouldn't pick bossy.
Mm-hmm.
I am like in charge of a lot of things, but I don't think I don't think it comes across as bossy, but I don't know, maybe he would say bossy.
Right. One of the things that I love about the family firm, and I haven't filled out the worksheet yet.
You haven't done the worksheets yet?
No. Okay. And also I love that you mentioned that in 3rd grade, your teacher was like, she just loves workbooks.
I love them. Love the workbook.
But I love the idea of a family mission statement. I actually wrote a personal mission statement for myself this year, which is something that I had never thought to do. But I had a guest on the show, Michael Buckley, and he talked about having made one for himself. And he read it and I was like, oh, that's amazing. And then I kind of filed it away. And then one day I just wrote sort of a rough drafty kind of thing. And the beginning of it is like, I want to live honestly and authentically, and show people that it's okay to be human. And then something came up on the show where there was an interaction I'd had with a guest that got a little bit awkward. And I felt like it didn't reflect the best on me as an interviewer. And I wondered if I should cut it out. Tony knows. We mostly communicate by text, but this was one of our phone calls because we went back and forth. Tony felt we should keep it in because he thought it was an interesting exchange. And I just kept going back and forth because I'm like, I could just take it out. And then as far as the listeners know, it was like a super polished interview.
Mm-hmm.
But then I looked at my little mission statement and I'm like, if I'm really trying to show people that it's okay to make mistakes and to be human, then I leave it in. And I did leave it in. And the mission statement helped me. But I hadn't thought about making one for a family. Can you sort of explain that process?
Yeah, so I think there's sort of some pieces of that. One is like the sort of mission statement, and then one is like a sort of subversion of that, which is like, what are your kind of main priorities or your main values? And I'd sort of put that all in the same bucket. And I think I think for me, the reason those things are important is because they surface possible disagreements, which is sort of a funny way to say it. So when I've talked to people about this, occasionally somebody will be like, well, sure, writing down a family mission statement, you writing down your priorities is great if you agree on them, but like, I'm not going to agree with my partner on these things. And I think like that's actually precisely why why you need this, that basically if we are not aligned on what we're trying to accomplish or the things that are most important to us, and we're trying to achieve something together, it is going to be difficult to achieve that because those disagreements are going to surface themselves in all of the little moments, in sort of like hot state moments, rather than, we're not going to avoid the conflict, right? And so I think that a lot of the value of the mission statement is to be able to, or all of these sort of pieces of it is to be able to say, this is what's important to me. And this is, and are we aligned on those things? And that's part of why I sort of suggested some of these things you'd like do separately, right? Like write these down without the kind of burden of having to agree while you write them down first, and then try to kind of come together and so we're all at least. And I also think there's some value in some ways to sort of like what you were saying, like to say we've written something down, now we can return to it. And we say like, hey, are the choices we're making like aligned with this thing we said was important to us?
I didn't write it down yet, but I was thinking, and one of my priorities is definitely sleep. That's just the most important. It's just so important. I wish it wasn't. But you get up at 5 a.m., right?
That's true.
Is that?
But I go to bed at 10.
How do you do this?
How do I go to bed at 10 or how do I get up at 5?
Both.
I mean, I don't, I really like the mornings. And we just like, I don't know. We just have a thing where we go to we just go to bed at 10. I don't know. And then I really, I kind of find that like getting up at 5, like kind of like that's kind of enough sleep for me to like, basically be okay. Like, right. And like the normal level of adult tiredness, I think. And I just really, there's like so much value to me in having that time in the morning that it's like, okay, that's like kind of my time space to use in whatever way I like want to use it.
Have you always been a morning person?
Yes. Even as a much younger person, like people will be like, we're going to go out at night. And I'd be like, it's like, guys, it's like 11:15. I don't think we're going to, let's just go to bed.
What were you like in college? Undergrad.
Yeah, like me, like pretty much like this. I lived with, so my best friend, was she's just wonderful, but she also she was like very cool. She was in this sorority and this thing, which is like, she's just like totally like cool and fun and smart and whatever. And I was like the one who was like there when she got home. You know what I mean? I am not, I'm not a like person who goes like, I did a lot of work. Like I did a lot of school, I like schoolwork. And I met my husband sometime in college and I spent a lot of time with him.
Mm-hmm. And he's also an economics professor, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
At Brown as well?
At Brown.
That's so cute.
Yeah. Yeah. We've been we met when I was 20. And so
I love that.
Now it's like more than half my life with that guy.
I have become obsessed with Rhode Island. And it's because Arden Marine, guest on my podcast, grew up in Little Compton, wrote a book about it, and has been taking these, I think, annual trips there and bringing friends. And then all of a sudden my Instagram feed is just filled with idyllic Rhode Island pictures. And I don't know what happened, but I'm like convinced that I have to move there. Do I have to move there?
Yes.
Okay.
I moved to Rhode Island from Chicago, and I have to say Rhode Island is the greatest. It was particularly like amazing during the pandemic because like there was nothing to do but to be outside, there was just being outside. And so we just like basically for like 8 months or whatever, like however, like we just like literally every weekend day we went hiking. And we kind of never ran out of hikes in Rhode Island. Like we just there's everything is like incredibly beautiful, and you just like go drive for like 20 minutes and then you're in some like incredible outdoor setting. Rhode Island is it's just the best. Little Compton is so nice.
Do you ever wish you were in a bigger city? Like, is there anything you give
because
up?
I'm boring, as I just previously mentioned. But no, I mean, there are occasionally things which I think, like when we were in Chicago, there's it's sort of like food and museums, right? So like, like the field museum, like the things that we could take the kids to, that, like those are not The Natural History Museum in Rhode Island is definitely not like the Field Museum. But we're not that far from New York, and then the food, like, I don't know, Rhode Island actually has pretty good food for, like, Providence has good food for a city its size, but also I have 2 little kids, so, like, we don't, I don't get to go out that much.
Sold. I'm doing it.
Yeah, you totally move here, and, like, Little Compton is so nice. We, like, go, like, farmers market. I mean, to give you a sense of, like, what Rhode Island is like, there is a farm in Exeter, Rhode Island that we get food from, and, like, we get it, like, delivered to our house once a week, like, and the farmer is, like, our friend. Like, she's like, we're like, oh, can we come tour the farm? Like, bring the kids. So we, like, bring the kids. And then she's like, it is just like, it's like the most idyllic, like, adorable state.
I love it. Tony, have you been there?
Yeah, but never extended time. Usually
probably been to Newport. Everyone goes to Newport. Newport is fun.
I think so. Well, and then Providence. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Tony, you can visit me when I move there, which I'm definitely doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you were sold when she said there were so many hikes. Right?
I tried to block that part out. Oh,
there are also beaches. There are also beaches.
What if you're like an indoor person who just loves looking at beautiful things?
Yeah, I mean, there's some mansions in Newport.
Love a mansion.
You can go on the mansion, but plus you can learn to hike.
I love a mansion.
Kids like to hike.
I love a lighthouse. I love a boardwalk. I love a pier, and I love cute house. I mean, it looks like there's all of that there.
We have all those things. Yes, we have all those things. Also, your kids could learn to hike.
They could, yes.
Yeah,
I could learn. If that's what's required.
We got my 6-year-old, we took him to New Hampshire the other day. We made him hike like a 6-mile hike, 1,000 feet elevation gain.
Oh my God.
Over a mountain. By the end he was a little whiny. But, like, that's what the pandemic did for us.
At the beginning, I would be whiny. By the end, I'd be dead. But I still would try. I would try it. Listen, we need to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to do questions that people have sent in. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp will help assess your needs and match you with your own licensed professional therapist, and you can start communicating in under 48 hours. You guys know I am a huge believer in therapy. I have a couple friends right now who are doing BetterHelp because during this past year and a half, a lot of people have felt like they would benefit from therapy. I know I certainly have. And trying to find a therapist has been difficult for people because they have these huge wait lists, and that's where BetterHelp comes in. You can start rapidly. They will get you to a therapist that is a good match for you. If the first person you're matched with, if you feel like, I don't know if this is the right person, you can change as many times as you want without an extra charge, which is great. So you don't have to feel like you're committing to something that is potentially overwhelming. That's how I know that when I started therapy, I was worried. What if I don't like my therapist? What if I'm committed? What if I don't know? I just think it's normal to have all these thoughts when you're starting something new like therapy. But believe me, I've been in therapy for a long time, and I'm perfect. So you too can be perfect. I'm joking. It's not like that, but it'll definitely help you work through all sorts of things in your life. I cannot recommend it highly enough. BetterHelp wants you to start living a happier life today, and it's more affordable than traditional offline therapy, and financial aid is available. Visit BetterHelp.com/bestfriend. That's better HELP, and join the over 2 million people who have taken charge of their mental health with the help of an experienced professional. In fact, so many people have been using BetterHelp that they are recruiting additional therapists in all 50 states. Special offer for Alison Rosen listeners: get 10% off your first month at BetterHelp.com/bestfriend. Again, that's BetterHelp.com/bestfriend. I also want to tell you guys about Purple. Doesn't it seem like the world's against us from getting a good night's sleep this time of year? I know. I've got a couple things getting in the way of my good night's sleep. I've got a 4-year-old who crawls into our bed. Although at first I was resisting it, but now I'm just like, fine. The more the merrier. Don't take that the wrong way, listeners. And then also I've got a husband who snores and a dog that snores. There's a lot of things trying to prevent me from getting a good night's sleep. However, Purple Mattress is here to solve all your bed problems. When you have a Purple mattress, you can sleep cool and comfortable no matter what the world throws at you. That's because only Purple mattresses have the grid. The grid is a unique ventilated design that allows air to flow through to help you sleep cool, even when it feels like 1,000 degrees out. And the grid is amazingly supportive for your back and legs while cushioning your shoulders, neck, and hips no matter how you sleep. I have a little sample of the grid, which my kids like to play with, and so it's not in the studio right now, but normally I would hold it up so you could see it. It's you can't stop touching it. It's just super, it's squishy in the perfect way, and you can see how it's ventilated so you sleep cool. Try your Purple mattress risk-free with free shippings and returns. Financing is available too. Purple is comfort reinvented. Right now, you'll get 10% off any order of $200 or more. Go to purple.com/bestfriend10 and use promo code bestfriend10. That's purple.com/bestfriend10, promo code bestfriend10 for 10% off any order of $200 or more. Purple.com/bestfriend10, promo code bestfriend10, terms apply. Okay, we're back. So I am on Patreon. Patreon.com/Alison Rosen. All sorts of fun stuff. Weekly bonus episodes of The Friend Zone. Zoom parties. A level where you can text me and I'll text you back. Access to the Thursday show videos. This particular video will be on YouTube. YouTube.com/Alison Rosen. But people can submit questions for my guest, and we have some questions.
Questions from our fans.
Okay. Anna Q says, I love Emily Oster, 30 weeks pregnant, and I constantly refer to expecting better. I also enjoyed Cribsheet. My son was 2 at the beginning of the pandemic and is now 3.5. The TV time has grown by 1,000%, and I'm worried it is negatively affecting him. Tantrums have been huge, but it's hard to say if it's age, the effects of the pandemic, or frying his brain watching TV. Should I be worried, or should I just strive to survive with a toddler right now?
I think mostly strive to survive with a toddler. I mean, I think that like the answer to that is in terms of the content. I think there isn't a lot of evidence to suggest that like the TV content itself is somehow going to impact behavior in those ways. What I hear from that question is that this person would like to set more limits, that they would almost enjoy setting the limits is not what I mean, but they may feel that would work better for them. So I think rather than framing this as like, is there a right amount of TV? I think what I would frame it as is like, do I feel like it's getting in the way of other things I want my kid to do? And if it is, then I need to think about setting some limits. And if in fact I'm like, she's perfectly happy, like if Anna's like perfectly happy with the amount of TV and just feels like somehow she should feel shame, I would like take that away. Like you should not feel shame about this. Like there's not a lot of evidence that screen time particular matters for any of these things. So I think it's really a question of like, is it bothering you? Mm-hmm. In which case you probably want to generate some rules. But if it's not bothering you, let it go.
Alison B says, yay, I'm reading her books too. I'm pregnant, and the yay is yay that you're coming on my show. I'm pregnant and due February 1st, and my brother's wedding is mid-April out of state. What would her risk assessment be for flying/traveling from California to Arizona with an 8 to 10 week old, risk with COVID and also other risks involved?
Okay, so first of all, it is not worthwhile to discuss the COVID risks in April of 2022. Now, I have no idea. And so I would put that aside.
Okay.
In terms of other risks, I think in general, that's kind of the edge of when you would want to start traveling, only because when very small infants are exposed to or get any kind of illness, the medical response is more extreme just because we worry more about them getting sick. And so, so I think, it's you're kind of on the edge of where if it were 4 weeks, I think they would say no. If it's 16 weeks, we're kind of usually people would think that was okay. You're kind of on the edge, probably it's important enough. People would do that, but this is an example of a time when some of it is just why did he schedule the wedding then? But also, you may have to go and just, try to kind of keep the baby on you.
I hadn't even thought about that. What's he up to with that wedding?
My brother scheduled
the youngest one.
Mm-hmm, his wedding when my daughter was 6 weeks old. Yeah.
Pulling focus.
And you know, I have gotten over it now that she's old enough to go to sleepaway camp, but it didn't, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably didn't
It was not
feel
great
good at the time.
It was not good at the time.
Oh, here's a question. It comes from Alison Rosen. Lately, I have been thinking about how much should I be letting my kids work out conflict versus how much should I be intervening? Because I overheard my older one cry in this new way that he cries, which is like very dramatic. It's like keening almost. It's like, and he was upset because he and Owen and the babysitter were playing with water and food coloring, and he's having what he calls a science experience. I think he means to say science experiment, but he calls it science experience.
Don't fix that.
Yeah.
Never fix that.
I won't. But so I heard him wailing and I was like, oh no. And then I heard him say, Owen took my colors or something. And I was thinking, now he's only 4.5, but it would be great for him in life, to understand that sometimes things happen that disappoint us and you just kind of got to like get through it. And I don't know if if he's not old enough to get that yet, but I started to think, have I been making have I given him the idea that you always get exactly what you want when you want it? Like, have I been making things too simple? And then yesterday when we were at the zoo, they both had churros, and Owen, the little one, finished his and then wanted Elliot's and was kind of going over like cookie and starting to go over to Elliot. And I was saying like, no, honey, that's your brother's. You already finished yours. That's your brother's. But I was thinking like, should I have let Elliot explain, should I have let them work out this Cain and Abel churro situation themselves?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think there's like a great database answer to that. I think I will say the thing I sort of struggle with my kids is like, when, particularly as they get older, it's much easier to ask my 10-year-old, like, look, why are you making such a big deal about this? Like, can't you just like let him have whatever is the thing? Like, why are you, like, how could this be so important to you? And I think that I have sort of pulled back a little bit on that with like, it's one thing to say like, life does not always deliver the things you want. I am not going to buy you that, you cannot have this dessert. You can't have candy at 2:00 in the morning. Mm-hmm. Like you can't, like some of the times, like there is a no. And there's a lot of value to being consistent about the things you say no to. But I think there's a difference between that and like, you need to, as the older kid, like sort of like there needs to be disappointment to sacrifice for your sibling. Right.
Right.
So I think I would sort of separate those two things out. And I think that like learning the lesson of like, you don't always get what you want is a good one. Learning it's like fine for your brother to take your colors right, because he's littler, that's like not a lesson. I think the question is like, what is the lesson you want him to learn?
See, it's that framing the question, which is
framing the question.
One of the 4 F's.
One of the F's. One of the F's.
Thank you. Okay, Luke Chastain says, my question, should you prioritize saving for yourself so you don't become a burden on your kids and allow them to be free? Or should you prioritize saving for them so they can go to the school of their choice and have some money to jumpstart themselves? And then he says, and I guess the B side of that previous question is, if University X costs $400,000 between schooling and housing over the course of their degree, should you discourage school? How do you judge the return on investment of education versus your child or yourself sitting in permanent debt?
Oh my God.
It's a huge question.
It's like such a big question. I think that there's a lot of good ways to save for college. I'm not, I don't think I have a good answer to this question. I think savings is savings. It's like, I'm not sure we need to like earmark it for particular things. And also it's hard to predict, certainly from the standpoint of having a younger kid, like what exactly are they going to want to do? Like when they get to that point, are they going to want to go to college? Are they going to want to go to a college that is expensive? What is the financial aid situation? This feels like something where it's pretty hard to make that decision from the like immediate moment from like when they're younger.
Well, I have a question for you as someone who is a professor. I feel like more and more, and maybe this argument was always there and I'm just hearing it more, but I hear people talk about how in this day and age, you don't need to go to college and sort of trash education or trash expensive education. I went to a small liberal arts college. In the same way I was raised to know that I wanted to have kids, I was raised to know that I was going to a small liberal arts college. Like it was just something that my family valued. And I also value it. So I think my kids will value it. But what do you do with that argument of like, it's not important anymore, you can just go to a trade school?
Yeah, I mean, I think that that is not borne out by the data. We have a lot of evidence suggesting that, you know, returns to college education are very, are very large in general. You know, doesn't necessarily mean college is going to be for everyone, but I think in like the idea that kind of a college degree is not worth anything is not really supported by the data.
Whitney C says, what was her favorite class in school? Parentheses, define school however you wish.
Probably, I took this really, amazing class, in college, on witchcraft.
Oh, wow.
Which, was like in my senior year in college, this the class on, it was just like on witchcraft. It was in the folklore and mythology department. That was the department that we had. And I ended up, you know, writing a paper about witchcraft, which ended up getting published in an Economist journal, which is like a whole other thing. But like, it was a sort of like totally, it was an example of a time when like I learned a lot of things that I wouldn't have otherwise known. And I got to kind of combine this one thing with this other thing I liked. So that was special.
That's really cool. Okay. And then question from Mary Katharine Ham, who is the one who introduced you to, when I was pregnant with my first son, she recommended Expecting Better. And just one thing that I want to call out from that book, I thought it was so fascinating. Your point about whether coffee is related to miscarriage, and that maybe it's that the women who don't lose their aversion to coffee don't have as strong a pregnancy. I thought that was really interesting. Okay. So Mary Katharine Ham says, I'd love to hear about her experience with polarization and Twitter mobs, maybe advice. She's fought off at least 2 in the past year. I think both around kid-related, mask-related COVID stuff, but I know it takes a toll. And I really like to incentivize so much more of her kind of thinking in online environments. Does she have any thoughts on how to do that?
I think Twitter has become just awful in the last, I mean, like, there's a piece of it that's very useful. Like it's a good place to get information, but the kind of discourse, particularly around some of the COVID stuff, has become so polarized. And it's not just polarized, it's angry in a way that I think is really unproductive. And there's kind of so much personal animosity. And, you know, I've struggled a little bit with sort of how to fix that. And also even the question of like how much to engage, right? So I have like other ways to engage that are, you know, longer, whereas it's easier to explain what you think. And I think that is, I definitely have these moments where it's like, I gotta stop this. Like it's too, you know, it's sort of too much. And I worry it's not productive, right? So there's a place for like legitimate sort of discussion and disagreement about some of these kind of facts. I think that's very, very reasonable. The sort of, you are trying to like, you know, kill other people. Part of this is like not helpful.
Right.
And I'm not sure where the path forward is. It's certainly gotten worse in the last 18 months.
COVID-19 question. I know a ton of vaccinated people who have gotten COVID. Sure. And I have heard, my mother-in-law's friend works in an ICU, and she said, we need to change our thinking about this. It's not that it's not about avoiding COVID anymore. Like eventually everyone's going to have it. Yep. It's just about being vaccinated so you don't get super sick. That being said, I myself really don't want to get it. I really don't want to. It seems miserable. The vaccinated people I know who have gotten it, some of them have just lost their sense of smell. And then some have been like, it's the sickest I've ever been in my life. What is your thinking about that? About like, do you feel calm about being vaccinated, but also getting it?
Yeah. I mean, I'm not calm is not the way I would put it, but I think the reality, like I tend to like try to live in like where I think the reality is that, you know, people are going to get COVID. like mild, maybe even like, the same way, like you're going to get for some people, it's going to be like a flu. You're going to feel sick. I think for most people, they're not. This is the reality, because it's a reality because of the way that vaccines work. It's not like, so just like when you're vaccinated, initially you have antibodies, like you get antibodies. And then if you're sort of immediately exposed to the infection and you have all these circulating antibodies, it kind of fights it off. But your antibodies wane over time, over like a period of 6 months or whatever. But that doesn't mean your immunity wanes. It's just that then your body has these like memory cells that remember how to make the antibodies. So if you're exposed again, it's got to like ramp up those memory cells to make the antibodies. That's the reason you don't get very sick, but there is some chance of getting, somewhat sick. So it's sort of like working exactly like we think that it is going to, it is going to work. But that's just like the reality of where we are. And so I think we have made this so salient, and it is scary. I'm like, but it also, like, I think we have to at some point realize that there are other costs as well. And that like when you get COVID, then at least for some period of time, you'll be like more protected against it.
Right. Mary Katharine also says, I'm always curious about exactly how big a threat SIDS is when there aren't other risk factors involved, and I've never really nailed it down.
Those risks are small without other risk factors. They're really, really small, like 0.06 in 1,000, 0.03 in 1,000, something like looks very small.
Okay. Let's take another super quick break and then come back with just me or everyone. I want to tell you guys about Rothy's. It's 2021 and nobody has time for uncomfortable shoes. That's where Rothy's comes in. Rothy's surveyed thousands of customers and the number one word used to describe their shoes is comfy. Rothy's are amazing. They're made out of recycled water bottles. And when I heard that, I thought, well, I don't want crunchy shoes, but they are super soft and yet sturdy and also stylish, and they're machine washable. You can wear them. I hope you're sitting down because this is a big, bold claim, and it's true. You can wear them straight out of the box without getting blisters. I don't think you can say that about any other shoe. Our dog walker, Kathleen, wears Rothy's because they're the only shoe she can wear right out of the box. And she's on her feet, you guys. I think we've established that I am someone who likes to not be on my feet, but Kathleen is an actual active person. So what I'm saying is Rothy's work, whether you're sedentary or whether you're walking all around town with dogs or without dogs. I picture like a high-powered person on their way to an important meeting, cutting a crisp silhouette in their Rothy's. But I also picture someone who likes to sit around, that's me, looking stylish in her Rothy's. There is an array of different silhouettes. So I have the point. I also have the flat. And just today, I made the decision I need to add the loafer to my life. So there you go. Their fan favorite styles are sustainably made with materials like plastic water bottles, fully machine washable, and available in tons of shapes, styles, and colors, so you can always find the right one for you. And Rothy's newly launched men's shoes are intentionally designed with an artisanal level of detail and created with nearly zero waste. Rothy's men's shoes are durable, washable, and better for the planet. Plus, rigorous testing during R&D results in a perfect fit wash after wash. Step up your summer wardrobe with washable, sustainable, stylish shoes and bags from Rothy's. Head to rothys.com/Alison to find your new warm weather favorites today. That's Rothy's, ROTHYS.com/Alison. And we're back. All right, let's do a Just Me or Everyone.
Is it just me or everyone?
All right, Emily, do you have a Just Me or Everyone?
I do. So here it is. When I get up in the morning and I get ready, I put my pajamas back on before I eat breakfast so I don't get food on myself, and then change my clothes later, even though I have otherwise gotten completely ready.
That is not just you.
You think not just me?
I don't know, because I do stuff like that. Like putting on especially my bra, but putting on my clothes that I'm going to wear to leave the house or that I'm going to wear to the studio. is the very last thing I do. Like, I don't want, for different reason than you, it sounds like, but I just don't want 1 extra minute in actual clothes.
Oh yeah, I do this even is true, like the hard pants. The hard pants are not so good. But yeah, it's like I think I'm just always, even though my kids are big now, I think I have like a holdover from when they would just like throw food at you. Which actually is really still true. Now that I consider it a little more carefully, actually, that still happens. So maybe it like makes a lot of sense.
Yes. Okay. There was a time when I was younger where I would put on my clothes and then put on makeup and do my hair. And now.
Right. Yeah. Now it's like everything is done and then the clothes are the last thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. That is not just you.
Okay.
Tony, what about you? Your clothes and shoes are on the second you exit the shower, right? And
Pretty
then you
much.
do your hair or shave or whatever you do.
Yep. Yeah.
So it's a weird life.
It's because men have like more comfortable clothes.
Yes. Yeah. Like we talked about this recently. My husband wears his jeans until he goes to bed. I mean, he takes them off for going to bed. I know.
As soon as I get home, I'm like, get this stuff off me. Where's my Lululemon pants?
Same. Okay. And then do you have would you like to tell someone off? Or someone or something? Okay.
I'd like to tell off the neighborhood skunk. When I run in the morning, he's always around. And I am constantly afraid that I will surprise him and I will get sprayed. And like for reasons I can't articulate, one of my big life fears is being sprayed by a skunk, because I feel like somehow I'll never get away from it. And so like I saw him this morning and he was like, there he was, like in the gutter, he was watching me. And I had to cross the street and stop and walk very slowly. Don't like him. So, hey, skunk.
Hey, go fuck yourself.
Have you ever been near someone or something that got sprayed? Because I remember our family dog, Woofy, got sprayed when I was a kid. And the up-close smell of that is very different than, it's almost like a violently acrid.
Yeah, my some skunks died in my friend's house.
Oh no!
And they had to move out for like a month.
Like they died under the house or something,
yeah,
or
they died under the house.
This is in Rhode Island.
Yeah. So I mean, yes, that's true. But I don't think it's not really
hiking and skunks. I don't know.
Now it's like I've saved the best for last.
Professor Oster. Also, Emily, thank you so much for coming on the show. This was so nice to talk to you. I really am I'm such a fan. So this has been such a treat to have you on the show. Everyone go out and get The Family Firm. But is there anything you would like to tell people to look for, to subscribe to et cetera? Plug anything.
I would say subscribe to my Substack, Parent Data.
Excellent. Thank you so much. If you guys like what you're hearing, please make sure you are subscribed to my podcast, subscribed or following or whatever the terminology is in your app of choice. Leave us a nice comment on Apple Podcasts. It helps out the show. And follow me on social media at Alison Rosen on Twitter and Instagram. Again, I'm on Patreon. I'm also on Cameo. And I have a book out called Tropical Attire and Courage and Other Phrases That Scare Me. Tony, what about you?
Just the usual Twitter and Instagram at
Tony Thaxton.
And my podcast, Bizarre Albums, every Tuesday.
All right. Thank you so much. Emily, thank you again. Listeners,
thank you
for listening. I love you. You matter. Goodbye.
Hey, do you know about the Alison Rosen show? We had a good time, but now we gotta go.